Welcome to Fairytale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairytale Access. I am so excited to introduce you to Josh Erikson, the author of Hero Forged, by Skype from Nebraska. Thanks for joining us this morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. This book was great. I love the con artist, and I love the way that you put in these little sketches as if he's writing his real life story as everything plays out. Tell me where you got the idea for that.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite parts. So initially, the book was much more serious than it ended up being. It was really dark and more about the kind of the dark side of the con artist life. And then that's just really not my personality, though. I'm not that kind of guy. I like to joke and emotions with humor. So instead of putting that into the book itself, I decided to show this other side of Gabe, kind of like how all of us have that kind of inner, deeper side that we don't necessarily show anybody on the outside. I wanted to put that kind of diary excerpts and then slowly reveal a little more about the real plot in those, for those who take the time to really read those.
No, they were fantastic. It really brought you into how a con artist thought, which makes me ask you, where'd you do your research? Or is this from personal knowledge?
Well, I'm not personally a con artist that I know of, but I've always liked that idea of people using just wits to be able to get pretty much whatever they want. And I'm too honest to do it myself, so I live vicariously through my character now. But I did quite a few kind of traditional cons. I have a friend who spent some time as kind of a, I guess you'd call him maybe a little bit of a grifter, maybe like a street musician. And he kind of gave me a few pointers, and then the rest of it is just, pure fiction, just for fun.
Wow, it was fantastic. It drew me right in. I couldn't stop reading. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad.
So tell us about the series.
Okay, so the series is envisioned as a 10-book series. So it starts off with the origin story with Hero Forged, and kind of how he gets into this whole extra world. The ethereal earth idea is that there are fictions coming to life in the real world, and if there's enough belief in the collective zeitgeist, that they can actually manifest in the real world. And there's a whole complicated reasons why that exists, but the main character, Gabe, basically just kind of flits through it and bounces between things, as he's dodging monsters and nightmares. But the whole series is envisioned as this big, much bigger story, seeing this small slice of it as it slowly unfolds.
You received a star review in Publishers Weekly. How did that happen?
It was just out of the blue. I submitted it to Book Life, which is their independent publishing arm, and it worked its way up through the system, and I got a review in Publishers Weekly. I didn't ever expect to get a starred review, though. That's kind of the coveted thing from them. So that was really exciting. It was kind of a nice affirmation of what I'm trying to do. So that was neat.
Right, and you chose to self-publish. Why did you do that?
Well, I got a little bit disillusioned with the traditional publishing process because you have to submit query letters to agents and then wait to hear back, and it's a really long process and a lot of rejection. And then even once you get an agent, then they submit it to publishers, and that's another long process with more rejection. And so I said, if I'm going to be getting rejection, I might as well go directly to the source and just publish it myself, and we'll see how it goes. Amazon has made it, and there are other services too, but Amazon especially has made it a lot easier to self-publish away. So it's pretty neat.
Nice. And you also narrate your books. You do your own audiobooks. Although we're having some sound problems today due to thunderstorms in your area.
Right, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, I've got storms going on here, but normally I've got a pretty good audio setup, and I do my own audio narration books, which is a really fun process, and that is actually where a lot of the success of the book has come from, is the audiobooks, and I'm really thankful for that.
Oh, that's great. You must be really good at that, with all the cynicism and the comic relief that goes on throughout the book. It's great. It's a great mix. It really works well.
I'm glad. A lot of the characters come, kind of slices of who I am, so it's not as much of a stretch. There are some characters in the book that are way different than me, and that was a challenge to give voice to. But the main characters, Gabe and Heather, are really just different versions of my own personality. So that was a little bit of a cheat on my part. It made it easier to voice.
Wow, but you're doing great. You also were a semifinalist in Mark Lawrence's self-published fantasy Blog Off, and you were shortlisted for BookNest's Best Self-Published Novel of 2018. So you're definitely on your way, and you have a lot of great reviews.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. It was June of 2018 when I first published, and I really had zero expectations. I just thought I'd throw it out there and see what happened, and I got involved with Mark Lawrence's contest pretty much right out of the gate. It was that summer that it opened up, and that opened up a bunch of really amazing opportunities for me that I didn't know were possible. They have so many good blogger volunteers that are working with that, and so many people that are watching it that kind of snowballed and got me a lot more notoriety than I would have had otherwise.
Wow. It's just a great urban fantasy, especially with a little bit of horror mixed in, with the comic relief, and there's mystery too, which always draws somebody in.
Yeah, I loved adding a bunch of different elements. So my idea for this book was to write it in layers. So pretty much everybody can get a little something out of it. I really wanted to write something fun and funny, so that no matter what, if you're going to have a good time. But then I also added some deeper layers of the mystery elements and some of those horror elements that kind of make it a little bit exciting. And then those deeper philosophical elements kind of in those little excerpts at the beginning of each chapter. I wanted to add some of those deeper things, but sneak it in there under the candy stuff. So there's a little bit of something for everybody that way.
Definitely. So a lot of the topics that you've come to accept in fiction. So what about subtle fourth wall nods that skirt the edge of self-awareness? Can you give me an example of what that means?
Sure. So the characters will often use kind of self-referential terminology that gives you just a little bit of a hint that they may be aware they're in a book or they're in a story, or they'll make fun of this not being tale, and so it's just little elements that bring you close to that fourth wall without actually breaking through, because the whole series is about fictions coming to life.
Yeah,
that's the entire conceit.
It's a good concept.
Yeah.
And how many
And
books are done so far?
two. The second one, Fate Lashed, just came out recently, last month actually. And the audiobook is going to be out any day now as we're recording this. So that one's just coming out, and then it'll be probably another 7 or 8 months, and then the third one will be out.
Wow. How long does it take to do an audiobook?
So the audiobook itself, the writing the book process is about a 6-month process. And then the audiobook takes anywhere from a month and a half to 2.5 months from beginning to end. When I do my narration, I have lots of little weird extraneous sounds that I end up editing out in the end. So it takes me much longer to actually get it cleaned up for a professional audiobook. And then the audio editing itself takes a really long time for me. I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to that. So I go through and I take out every single little sound, and I'll record multiple versions of the same line and pick my favorite one and splice it in. So that is a long process, but it's a lot of fun in the end.
Oh, that's great. So where are you moving on to next after this series?
This series will probably take a good couple more years to finish, and I have some ideas for some novellas and short stories that are going to happen in a parallel to the main story. I also have an idea for a kind of in its early stages for a near future sci-fi series that I'm just kind of nailing down. That's really similar to Ready Player One. That's a big famous one recently. But the success of the audiobook has allowed me to write quite a bit more than I ever expected to be able to. So I'm just ready to pour out a bunch of ideas I've had knocking around in my head.
That's great. I like the way you challenge the reader through the characters too, about different choices and the family conflicts that different families have that came up in the book were amazingly well done. Like that love-hate relationship. Sure.
Yeah, that was actually something that developed later in the book. It originally started as a little more two-dimensional, and luckily I had a great editor, and she pointed it out that I had all the pieces there, and I just needed to add a little bit more, and it was like a lightning bolt to me that I went through the book and I found all these things that I had laid out for myself and didn't realize it, and so it took a little bit of tweaking, and it came into this really neat commentary on family, like you said, that there are a lot of bad things that happen in that family dynamic, but the main character still would really love to salvage something out of that if he can, and I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Definitely. And it's amazing the lengths that he goes to salvage it, and the surprising twist.
Yeah, he really does. I think in the end, without spoiling anything, in the end, it's really more about who he is than anything else, and that's kind of the dual meaning of the title, Hero Forged. Initially, it's he's a con man, so initially the definition of forged is that he's faking being a hero, and then in the end, it's up to the reader to decide if he becomes one or not. Becomes a hero or not.
Oh, that's good. What other elements did you add in that make it so unique?
I liked the traditional urban fantasy. I grew up on things like Jim Butcher, and I wanted to write something like that, but I loved the idea of adding some real horror as well, but kind of this gloss of humor over the whole thing, really similar to Joss Whedon, what he does with like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and shows like that. He has this really dark background, but then this funny dialogue over the top of it.
Yeah, I like the dialogue. Can I give an example?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So there's nothing so satisfying as pulling off a good con. Being the smartest person in the room is intoxicating, and it's tough not to want that again and again. But true perfection is in conning someone so well that they never suspect you. You win by leaving them thinking they've won. The only shame is never being appreciated for how good you are. My eternal curse. That being said, I will also take plain dumb luck any day of the week. Excerpt from Chapter 2, Con Science. It was so cute. Like, you could have a whole book about con science and the whole mentality behind it just from those experts. Those are great.
I'm glad. I've actually had people say that they would buy the con science book if I wanted to write it ever. And so it's a possibility.
It's really great how you got into the con artist's head, though, and just bring everything to life. And then everything that follows, all the action of what's going on in real life, fits that narration.
Yeah. I tried really hard to link the excerpt up to the chapter, either before or after. Especially toward the end, you'll see a lot of clues in those excerpts if you're watching carefully.
Definitely. The whole thing was like a fortune hunt all the way through. It was great. So, where else did you get input into the criminal mind?
I try to put him in a very difficult situation and then think through the most interesting way to get out of it. And since he has very little scruples, he can do pretty much whatever he wants. He doesn't have to abide by the same rules that you and I would follow.
Hopefully we'd both follow those rules.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes it seems like it would be fun to be him.
Yeah, no kidding. I know. That, like I said, I can live through him vicariously then without getting in trouble with the law.
Exactly, which is why I enjoyed reading it so much, and I can't wait to read more. So what's your background? Were you always a writer, or?
I wrote for fun for a long time, and it was actually, I had a pretty stressful job about an hour away from where I live, and so I spent a lot of time trying to decompress and a lot of time alone with my thoughts in the car. So writing came as a natural way to get rid of those thoughts and get rid of the stress, and just decided it was time to give it a shot for real and publish.
Wow. And how long did it take you to write the first book?
The first book took about 3 years, but I was teaching myself to write in the process. So there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of different versions of the book. The second book came together much faster, and it was much easier in a lot of ways. So it was about 6 months to do the second book as opposed to the 3 years. So.
Wow, you must really enjoy writing. You have 8 more coming.
Yeah, I do. And the big thing is I really enjoy the world. I had a hard time when I was a kid putting books down. I didn't want a trilogy to end. 3 books was never enough for me. Mm-hmm. So I really like the new series that go for 10 or 15 books. That's really appealing to me. And there's a lot of story in this world that I'm building. And so it's just pure fun to come up with more plot and more characters and more terrible situations for them to be in.
Great. More terrible situations. So you can, if you're mad at somebody, do you write them into the book?
No, the temptation is there for sure. I've put people that I like into the book for sure, but if I do put anybody that I'm upset with, I just use characteristics. I never use names or descriptions or anything. That's dangerous. But there are some unpleasant characteristics in some of the characters for sure.
That's fun. What kind of books did you read growing up?
I actually started with fantasy choose your own adventure books. Mm-hmm. I really loved those, and those are a little fourth wall breaking too, where you pick your own path And so I love the idea of being in your own story. And it's not too much of a stretch to say that some of the elements in this series come from that as well. Kind of the idea that our stories can be in the real world as opposed to us being in our stories. So.
Right, and you have children, so do you get a lot of the ideas for the characters that are coming to life from books that you're reading with them?
Yeah, we never had, when I was little, never had the young adult books that are around now. Harry Potter really kind of sparked that new middle grade and young adult craze. And so my son is about 10, and he has unbelievable books that he has access to now that I never did. And so that's really fun to see him experiencing this stuff from the beginning. So yeah, that is really interesting to watch happening now that I'm a grown-up.
Oh, that's great. What advice do you have for young people now?
The best advice that I can give, like, there's so much advice out there, and it's all available for anybody who wants to study it. But the best advice I can give is just do your best work. No matter what you're doing, do the best version of it, because it's so tempting to just do as much as you feel like or just good enough, but that'll never make you stand out. The only way to really get ahead is to just do the best you can possibly do and push yourself beyond what you think your limits are. And that's where success is. That's where your dreams are. So that's the best advice I can give. It's simple, but it's totally true.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing so much about yourself and your series. We really appreciate having you on today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And if you want a really great series to read that'll just twine you into urban fantasy, Hero Forge is a great place to start. Thanks again. Keep asking questions.